How we doing, guys? I've just come back from my first ever Brazilian Jiu Jitsu session, and blimey, that was like nothing I've ever done before. First time ever in physical combat with other people, and it's safe to say I got the absolute emojis kicked out of me. Arse was kicked deeply. They literally got to the anus, spread the cheeks, reached their foot in and gave it a good kick for good measure. That's what they did. Or was it metaphorically? Might have been. Now, believe me when I say I'm absolutely not a fighter. In any confrontation, I am much more likely to perform a psychoanalysis on my opponent, and both of us end up in this emotional embrace from our deep-rooted emotional traumas. Now, believe me, that has happened before. It's happened in the middle of clubs. So I tried to research a few of the basics before I turned up for my trial class, but to be honest, I was going in completely zero. I didn't know what was going on. I mean, I was completely petrified turning up at that gym. I had no clue what was going to happen. I mean, to be honest, because it was my first time at that gym, I didn't know who to talk to, where to go, and the nerves of that was actually greater than the prospect of literally being choked until I was purple. But when I arrived, the reception lady showed me over to the waiting sofas. I thought it was very posh that there's these nice leather sofas in the middle of a gym for me to wait. And soon enough, another guy turned up who was also taking a class. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to ask for some tips, get a bit of advice from someone who's done it before. And I mean, I was grateful that he went on to spend 5 solid minutes telling me all the moves, all the techniques, all the positions and everything in such great detail. I was grateful as I was. You know when you stop listening and just start concentrating on looking like you're listening, looking like you're taking in everything they were saying, because bloody nothing was going in at that point. But anyway, we eventually got shown to the mats and I got to meet all my other classmates for the evening, and I'll tell you, I was very surprised. I expected to be a complete outcast in terms of physical stature, because I mean, I turned up in my running gear and, well, look at me, I'm a thin streak of piss in her. But I was fascinated at the physical diversity of the class. I mean, there were young teenagers, there were old geezers, there were men, there were women, there were people of the stockier type, and there were people of leaner bodies. So I didn't feel like I was sticking out too much. I mean, obviously it doesn't hurt to be the size of a mountain, but I at least felt good, so I didn't feel like I just walked into the salty splatoon. I then got another surprise when they let me borrow one of the gi garments. The actual costume that they wear in BJJ, it's called a gi, which I can only assume is named after the ex-West Ham right back Guy Demel. But anyway, I put on the Guy Demel, and so the lesson begins. The first part of our warm-up consists of running around the mats, and I thought, brilliant. This is my bread and butter. I mean, as clueless as I am at BJJ, I'm a bloody black belt when it comes to running. We do a few variations, arms up, high knees, backwards. I still don't feel too self-conscious yet. But then we were told to get into 2 lines, and this is where the wheels came off. Now, first we had to do roly-polies. Now, I read online that in BJJ, you actually have to roll off your shoulder to protect your neck. And I got this right until we had to go backwards, where somehow I managed to flop back, kill all momentum, and then do this neck stand where I couldn't shift myself neither forward nor back. I was just stopped dead on my neck. It was like for a solid 2 seconds I was just stopped dead, holding up this entire traffic of rolling people behind me just because I'm balancing on my own neck. And then it came to the final part of our warm-up exercises, and this was extraordinary, right? We had to get into a circle, and we had to get into this wrestler's stance where we got bent knees and we've got our hands out, and we had to shuffle around side to side in this clockwise circle, and the instructor would shout out 1, 2 or 3. 1 meant that you had to suddenly drop down and get into this athletic shaggers position and then get straight back up again. Now, I'm not usually that bad at these reaction games, but unfortunately the same couldn't be said for my spatial awareness. The first time the instructor called out 1, I thought, right, we've got to be proper on this. So I dropped down and I shot both legs out, but didn't realise that my legs spilt off the mat. And because there was an entire gym behind me, I didn't realise that there were 2 barbells literally lying right next to the mat. So I shoot my legs out, and as I hit the ground, both ankles absolutely fucking smash onto these barbells, like proper bone on metal. Proper clangs them. But that wasn't the worst of it, because on the next calling of 1, in my eagerness to get to the ground as quickly as possible, I flopped my crotch before any other part of my body and crushed my underneath my entire body weight on no less than 2 occasions. The pain lingered, especially when we were doing triangles and it was my turn to count out loud. 1, 2, But other than that, I thought the warm-up went pretty well. So next we had a demonstration, and the first move I was to ever learn in BJJ was the armbar. So it was when we were actually practicing this move with our partner that I fully began to realise just how vast and expansive Brazilian Jiu Jitsu really is. There are so many steps, so many movements, so many little ways you've got to shift your hips and grab your opponents, guide them all properly. There is so much going on, and it's where I realised just why it takes years, decades, just constant commitment to be able to get in a position where you can master, I mean, not even just the martial art itself, but the actual just one move. It requires such dedication, and my respect for the sport went up immensely. And just as I was starting to get the hang of the armbar and just beginning to memorise the moves, the instructor suddenly says, "Right, let's do some sparring." I thought, hang on, proper sparring? I only know one move and I can't even remember how to do it. But yes, ladies and gentlemen, it was time. It was time for the first time in my life to ever engage in physical combat one-on-one with another person. And as expected, I was passed around the group and ripped to shreds like a game of human pass the parcel. And this is the thing, right, with these martial arts. You have to leave your ego at the door. It's important to know thyself. Everyone says it's the most humbling sport for a reason. Good thing I expected to get absolutely beaten up, otherwise my self-esteem would have been One thing I do want to emphasise is how helpful all of my sparring partners were. They were really kind and helpful in showing me a few of the moves, showing me what actually goes on in the process of a roll. So it wasn't literally just a mauling for me, and it turned into a productive learning experience for both of us. And another thing that struck me through this experience was the great variety in skills and experience in the white belt ranks. I mean, at first glance, all of us were wearing white belts. It was a class full of white belts, so you'd think we were all beginners and we were all on the same level, but far from it. You will find in just a few weeks of practice the skill difference is humongous. There's such a stark contrast, and you really can't judge someone's ability or experience just from looking at the white belt. It's so much deeper than that. If you've been looking at getting into Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, then obviously I am not the person to be giving out any kind of advice, but as far as I'm aware, for a first lesson you will undergo an entirely new test on your physicality. Like, even I like to consider myself someone who's in decent enough shape, but I was panting like a sheep on a hot day after just the warm-up alone. It's a completely new physical game, and in terms of not just physically but mentally and spiritually as well, you will learn new weaknesses within yourself, and it is a very, not just humbling but very spiritual experience in some aspects, the sparring. Like, Russell Brand will go into much more elaborate and relevant detail about this than I could ever hope to, but you definitely learn a lot about yourself when there's another geezer pinning you to the ground with the intention of submitting you, possibly choking you until you're unconscious, and you have to try and find a way out of it. I mean, all the negotiation books, I mean, all of the getting to yes that I've read, you can't use any of this at that point. You have to it can't be negotiated out of. I think I came out of it all a better man though, in a small way. Only a few cuts and bruises. I mean, I've got a little boo-boo right here. Well, actually it's almost completely healed, but this is a battle boo-boo, and it took 24 hours for the muscle soreness to properly flare up, and I tell you, I felt pain and aches in muscles I didn't even know existed. It was extraordinary. I can definitely say it is one hell of a workout in every sense of the word. But I tell you what, in the days afterwards, I felt the same way I did on the morning after my first marathon. I thought, I'm in quite a lot of pain, but I'm well up for doing that again. But yeah, that was just a little story about my trial BJJ lesson. Definitely a really fond experience, which I'd recommend to everyone. But yeah, thanks very much for listening, guys. Hope you're having a nice day. Hope this has given you a little laugh, a little smile. And yeah, I'll catch you in the next video. Take care, guys.